Episod të flasim e ftuara është një personazh I veçantë, një person që për shumë kohësh nuk ka dashur të më shikojë me sy, por ka pranuar ftesën dhe me shumë kënaqësi unë uroj mirëseardhjen Alice Taylor.
Përshëndetje.
You play piano and not many days ago you donated a piano of yours to the music high school. Secondly, what I learned about you is that you went up to 126 kilogram and then you went down to 68 kilogram.
No, 81.
81. Okay, so this is a media problem. So tell me about you playing piano, you playing with your weight, and you playing this important part of your life in Albania.
That's quite a lot to fit in, but I'll give it a go. So I started playing the violin actually at the age of 4. I'd watched Fantasia, the Disney film, and begged my mum for a violin. And eventually she yielded and bought me one, and I feel terribly sorry for her for those initial years when I was learning. And then after a while I said I wanted to learn the piano as well, and I played up until the age of 16. I stopped because life and travelling and adventures got in the way, and then I picked it up again recently, about a year and a half ago. And I'm trying to get my daughter to play, but it's not going too well. In fact, when I start playing, she'll come running into the room from wherever she is and go, "Mummy, shh," like this. So I have to turn the volume down. And if I start singing as well, it's even worse. She gets even more upset. But I'm not great, but it's something I do to relax, you know. It's sort of meditative for me.
Do you recognize yourself in this following quote, which I found by researching in your Instagram? Blondes have more fun.
I think so. I've had various hair colours over the years, and I think blonde is probably the most fun. But going on to your second point as well, because I'll lose my train of thought, to do with my weight, and this is something.
I was not gonna let you lose this train.
This is something actually. I had some health problems because I'd gained a lot of weight during the pandemic. I had problems with my blood pressure and lots of other things that come with not having a very healthy lifestyle. And the doctor told me you have to walk 5 kilometers every day. And I was like, okay, well, this sounds a bit boring, you know. So I started walking 5 kilometers, and then I thought, why don't I try running a little bit? And I started running. Now, bear in mind, when I was at school, I used to forge letters to get out of doing running. So me running around the lake park was something quite spectacular. And yes, I lost 47 kilos in total. And I get a lot of people messaging me saying, "Oh, you look so good, you know, you look so slim. How did you get so thin?" But about to be healthy and to set a good example for my daughter more than anything.
And what is your best recipe you can give to so many girls and women, but also men that wonder about their weight, and then they do try to find shortcuts, pills, diets, all this stuff?
They don't work. Diets don't work. They are not sustainable. There's no pill which is going to make you healthy. You have to start by changing your mindset, and you have to be doing it for the right reasons. So that is your health. Because without your health, you have nothing. The weight is a secondary thing. You have to be active. It's good for your mind, for your soul, for your body, for everything. There is no shortcut. You have to make it a part of your life. And I think many of us, we don't put our health as a priority. You know, we don't look at what we eat. We don't make sure we move enough. We don't walk. We get a taxi instead, you know, and this is a mindset that's wrong in our society, I think. So yeah, it's not about being skinny. There's no quick fix. You need to change your whole mentality and put yourself first, because when you do, it will make you a better person in every aspect of your life.
And before going to your very open and repeatedly said with a loud voice, love about Albania, I want to just touch another quote of yours about the real marriage. I went through this and I found fascinating your tale, and you say that the real families are not just heterosexual, are not just monogamic, are not just marriage connected.
And it's not just here I've noticed this sort of rhetoric, but that a real family must be a married family, you know. For example, an LGBT couple, they can't get married because marriage is this sacrosanct thing, and only children should only be born into a marriage. But does a marriage guarantee that it's happy, that it's safe, that it is a good environment to raise a child, and that it's healthy for everybody involved? Having a piece of paper, going through a ceremony doesn't automatically mean that that's a safe home, a safe environment for everybody in it. You know, I think it's a lot more complicated than that, you know. It's about the love and respect between two people. It's about providing a safe and nurturing environment. It's about giving each other freedom. It's about it's not about a piece of paper, and that upsets me. I mean, without going into too many details, my parents were married and it wasn't any of those things that it should be, you know. And I've been through situations myself where I've been in situations where it's a family, but on the inside it's not a safe environment. So I think we do people an injustice when we say that people should just get married and that a child can only be raised by a husband and a wife, for example, because it's really about the individuals and how they work together. And if they don't work together, sometimes it's better not to have a child in that situation.
And you had this written reflection on it after a very disturbing experience, I must say, in the bank when you went to ask for a loan.
Yes.
And when they realized that you had a daughter, but you were not married, they said we
don't lend to. We prefer not to lend. We prefer to lend to real families.
Yeah.
And I said, a real family? You mean if I have a husband? Yes, they're very traditional. The board are very traditional. And I said, so if I was married, but my husband had no income, a terrible credit score, that would be okay, yes. So it didn't matter the fact that I was earning a good income, had ticked all the boxes, but because me and my daughter were not a real family, that was not considered enough.
But despite this episode and I'm sure other episodes, you still are in love with Albania, and you don't make a secret out of it anytime you can. But I want to ask, do you have many people telling you, oh, come on, stop this, because it's not what you think, it's not how you see it, and you are a foreigner and you just see the fun of it, but we are here having big difficulties?
Do you know, overwhelmingly, I get positive feedback. I think there's only been a handful of people in the 5.5 years I've been here who've said, oh, you're just talking from privilege, blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of I get so many messages from Albanian people living here and abroad saying, you know, actually, you're right. Yes, there are problems, but you've made me see things that I hadn't noticed. You've made me see things through your eyes, which has been really refreshing, or you've reminded me that there are things to love about being here. So actually, while there are a few negative voices, and they do have a point, I am privileged to be able to say, I love living here, you know. Overwhelmingly, it's been positive, and I get quite touched when people who I know struggle in various ways say, thank you. Like, reading what you've written with such passion has made me feel different about my country, even if only for a second. That's hugely rewarding.
And I found through my studies to prepare this podcast that you speak about great uncle that traveled these lands 150 years ago.
150 years ago. So my mother was researching our family tree, and my great, I'm not sure, she'll probably be quite angry with me for not being exact, uncle, one of 20-something brothers and sisters at the time, was Edward Lear, who is a painter, was a very good painter, and a poet and a writer, and he travelled extensively through Albania. He painted, he wrote, and I actually tried to track down some of the places he'd been to and painted and try and take a photo in, the same spot or as close as I could get. And it's not why I came here. I wasn't sort of trying to be like him, but then when I realised, I thought, I wonder if there's some sort of generational link there, perhaps. But yes.
Before going to the toughest part of our conversation, you came here for just a few days, and still
longest 3-day holiday ever.
Here are, and you say it was meant to be.
Yeah.
You have very harsh words about the European Union also, although you were, as I understood, totally against Brexit.
Yes, I'm pro-EU, pro-Europe, but not always pro-EU.
And then we start here with the Albania case and the other big episode of your life in Albania, which is titled Edi Rama. I have gone through your articles, and I would start with a question you make in one of the articles. What exactly has changed, Eddie? So I would really want to elaborate this with you, but of course this is maybe not the, we don't have enough space and time, but I would like to ask you, did you see through footages or through materials what Albania was in the beginning of 90s and then the beginning of 2000? I'm sure you did. And if I would ask you, how many years you are now?
5.5.
So in these 5.5 years, do you see change? Do you see things changing?
And in fact, I'm writing about this at the moment. So obviously in 5.5 years, there have been a huge amount of changes. Some of them are good, some of them I'm not necessarily a huge fan of. I don't like all the concrete in Tirana, I don't like all the high rises, I don't like the demolition of the National Theatre, but I like cycle lanes, for example. I like the fact my electric stays on, that I have water around the clock. These sorts of things have changed. The fact that things are all online now, it's a lot easier to get things done here. The roads throughout the country are a lot better. Yes, so there have been changes, but of course there are still things that once you live here for a longer time and you immerse yourself more into the society, that you begin to understand and you begin to see. And I think I want to preempt our discussion by saying my criticism, and we've talked about this before, my criticism comes from a place of passion, because when I write an op-ed, I write because I have a strong sense of social justice. If I see something that upsets me, I hear something that upsets me, it upsets me deep inside, and that comes out. And it's because I want things to change. It's because I want to raise my daughter here. It's because I want to grow old here, It's not because I'm just being a pain for the sake of it. You
revealed here unintentionally, I guess, that we talked before, and I let it for the end because I wanted to also touch, and we will touch at the end, the subject of our meeting and my ask for help in terms of understanding what we could do better, what the government could do better vis-a-vis the freedom of media, but also tackling what is for all concerning in the media world. But going on, I would just try to face you with some of your criticism. And this being said, I first want to fully agree with what you already said. And this is the reason why I still continue to struggle, because although a lot of things have happened for good, there are a lot of other things that are not good. And this is why we have to keep going and we have to fight to make them better. But there are things that I tend to fully disagree with you. For example, you say in one of your writings, which I must admit are very accurate and fact-based, so it's very difficult to get you wrong in facts. Not so difficult to get you wrong in opinion, but opinions are free and legitimate. You say in 2019, hoping 360,699 people left the country, equivalent to 12.4%. Now, I have here the data, and I brought it here because it's important to try and share this data in any occasion that this pops up, that in 2019, the leaving people from the country were 43,835. And on the other hand, it's very important also another dimension that we have them who are leaving, and they are by no doubt more than who are coming, but we have also them who are coming. Returnees from long years of immigration or returnees from failed attempts to emigrate. But the most important part of it, I think, has to do in this case with the question: what do you would you, if you were in my place, what would you have done better to prevent people leaving? And do you really think that there is a possible force that can stop this kind of historical trends that have to do with many complicated reasons?
But in order to do things better, I think we really have to understand what is driving the problem. And I don't think that's completely clear. And I think there are many different factors that come into play here. Like, I believe that it's not just to do with people believing that they can't get a good job here, that the salary is not high enough, that there aren't good opportunities, that there's not good education. You know, these are the reasons I hear bandied about. But I do think that there is a deeper issue which underpins a lot of it. And this is to do with what happened at the end of communism, what happened in 1997. I think there is and maybe I see this from an outside perspective, but I think that there is very much an open wound in Albanian society still from what's happened in the past. And I think that this is, in a way, passed on to younger generations and to the younger people. And I think it leads to a feeling, because there's no real reconciliation, I think this leads to a feeling of people maybe feeling a disconnect with their country, feeling a disillusionment. You know, they listen to their parents who are complaining and they feel this sort of frustration in a way. And I think this is something which, when combined with all the other factors to do with people having a desire to emigrate anyway, but also economic factors, jobs, etc., I think this creates the sort of phenomenon we have in Albania at the moment.
But yeah, maybe. I'm not here to contradict you. You are here to contradict me. But in the same time, I believe that we should also look a bit differently the whole thing, because globalization with its products has succeeded to reach everywhere, even in the most remote areas of a country like Albania, that is highly mountainous, and you like mountains. So bringing these products here through all the social media, through all the many channels of communication, and through all this never-ending mass of things that come and challenge completely the reality, which may not be perfect, far from it, but may not also be, and I think it's not as dark as it looks in comparison with all these shining things that are coming. And so the people are attracted from it, and people want to go where the product is, and people want to try the products, and people have the tendency to say, okay, I'm a 20 years old boy in this village. I don't care how much progress the government or whomever around me is telling me this is happening, because it's nothing there for me vis-a-vis what it can be there for me now in London or in Berlin or elsewhere in the West. And instead of waiting 20, 30, 40 other years, like my parents did, I'm going to go now. And the other element has to do with the open up of chances. For example, in one of your critic articles, you say that 2 years into Rama first mandate, people realized the way things were going. In fact, I think it was 2015, and it was exactly the moment when a big route opened from the coming of million and more refugees towards Germany and towards the north. And at that moment, it was like, come. Or the channel, the channel that we'll go to it later, of boats going to Britain. It was like popping up, and in parallel, some of people maybe have planned, some other people saw that, it's open, let's go. There is this possibility. Anyhow, it's a difficult and complex, and this I agree with you. But I want now to face you, because you tell your readers, not forget that Rama comes from a family of communists, and he told us that his father was on the right side of history. Now,
that caused a big stir.
This of my father was what I said about my father had to do with the Second World War, right side of history, meaning that the communists were in the right side of history at that time, and then of course they brought hell on earth. Let me say it all. I have the impression when I read this that you would not say it if you would not have had some Albanization and some merging with the local and context, because for a woman of the world like you, traveler, liberal, very, very much passionate about writing, but also in general with strong opinions, but as I said, trying always to not play with facts. To say something like that.
Bearing in mind how I feel about this country and being here, that I feel more at home here than anywhere else, when I started to look into the history, and I've read so much and I've done interviews and documentaries with families who are still missing relatives after the end of communism, and I've seen them crying over photos of their loved ones. They don't know where the bodies are, people who lost land and all sorts of things, and it had horrific experiences. You have to be very cold to not let that touch you emotionally, to see people, to understand some of the suffering, a lot of the suffering that went on, that happened in the camps in Tepelena, that happened to persecuted people, and that stays with you, and you become angry about it.
I can't agree more with you, and I was angry with that, and it was this anger that anger that brought me in the streets against communism. But this notion of the communist family, and then there is something else that I want to add. Here, we are still paying the cost of what happened. But I think the cost of what happened is fundamentally related with the damages that communism did, not simply physically to people, not simply economically to the country, not simply in terms of so many traumatic events like blowing up churches and mosques with dynamite, like stopping access to every kind of art and culture of 20th century and more than that, but also in leaving behind after its fall, a void between two people or two parties or two sides that are in contest. Communism killed every notion of the opponent. The opponent didn't exist. The idea that someone had the right to be an opponent didn't exist. So you were the enemy, not the opponent. And without the killings, without the jailings, without the political persecution for your opinions, we kept going with the character assassination, with the way of debating our different opinions. That was all the way. Was simply like, and still is in some part of it, like pretense of death, like a pretense of a perpetuity, like, and this is, but this being said, I'm not going to give you the justification of saying communist family, because everyone has is accountable for what he is and or for what she is and everything like that. Now, another topic that apparently you liked but you disliked. There is a permanent pattern in your writings about me and about the government, where even when there are things you like, you immediately start to dislike. The country now leads globally in terms of the number of women in decision-making positions. While on paper this is an excellent accomplishment, I cannot help but wonder if this is nothing more than equality washing. And then you go further, and I'm telling you, I can't agree more with what you say further about the problems of women in the ground, about the reality of difficulties for women and so on. But don't you think that instead of facing this thing like an accomplishment in paper, you could, or one could say, this is great, fine. But I hope very much that this is not simply one-off move, but this is the expression of the awareness that the government has to lead by example, and that these women that come so numerous in the government have to work now to bring it more down in the society, and all together to see more how this thing that when it comes to the top level has materialized can slowly materialize.
I think my point was more that it was being sort of celebrated as the most feminist government. You know, look how progressive we are, when actually under the surface, the reality for the average Albanian woman or a woman in a rural area or a young girl is completely different. So to the outside world, people were saying, oh, look at Albania, they've got these women, they must be so progressive. And nobody was really aware of what the situation is and how different it can be for women. And that's where I felt the injustice was. I think it's important to put women in positions within the government. And like I said, that's great. But we have to, there is still a huge amount of work to be done because these problems are not being solved. They're not.
And this, and what we did is exactly the expression of awareness that is a lot of work to be done. This is part of the work to do. And on the other hand, I was very interested in the whole depiction you made of the legislative framework, the legal framework in Albania that about women that ranks very high among many countries. And I absolutely agree that you are right, and we share the same opinion that this country, not just about women, but in many other fields, in paper is much more progressed because we have done good laws, we have done reforms that have changed a lot. But the big struggle is implementation.
Yes, getting it to trickle down to the judges, the police.
You can put everything in the law. You can rank here. You can rank here at number 34. You can beat United States, Switzerland, Japan, Singapore, Bulgaria, and so on. But this is not enough at all when then a woman, a mother, single mother goes with her daughter in a bank, which is supposed to be a top level, let alone the police in the street or
in a court and is told, actually, he wasn't violent enough.
Or in
Do you want me to come back when I'm dead? You know, this sort of...
Exactly. Then it's very clear that the gap is big. But where you should agree with me is that this move and this kind of moves, putting the quotas, imposing, you know, when I started to lead the Socialist Party and I started to have discussions about more women participation, I have faced men, not once, but in so many areas, typically peripheric areas of the country, in the Socialist Party meeting, saying to me, "We have no women here." And it was, and they were not lying. They really were not seeing them. Women there were invisible.
Yes.
So, imposing quotas, imposing this new thing in the party that we should have, for every Socialist Party organization, we should have not only, we should have a man and a woman leading, and still today, now I can tell you, it's among us, confidential. Nobody's gonna, you are not gonna write about it, that we have not filled all the positions of women. So if we have 5,000 and some few hundred organizations in the country, we don't have the same number of men and the same number of women as we have the number of men leading the organizations.
But what's driving that? Is it because their role is at home? Their role is at home. They're being kept at home.
Listen, the transformation has been huge, by no doubt. Changing the topic, I want to go to your love of Albania that you fight for big time, and you have a big love for Tirana, but not gonna stop to Tirana because don't want you to be involved in any way in any type of election dispute. But did you ever loved England?
No. I think
so. It was not your first love.
No, absolutely not. If I, and I think I've written this somewhere as well. If I think of England, I think of the color grey. If I think of Albania, I think of red, orange, yellow, green, blue. It's just a completely different place for me. England, I never felt like I completely fitted in. I didn't know where I was supposed to fit in society. I wasn't very inspired. I mean, I was as a kid. I was writing poems and things like that, but I never really knew what my purpose was there, you know? So I left. I tried a few other countries along the way. And when I came here, I just felt, I don't know, I felt something. I felt like I was home. Even now when I travel to Brussels for work, which I do quite often, the first day I'm like, oh, you know, it's nice. It's raining, but it's nice. And then by day 2, I'm like, I kind of want to go home now.
It's fascinating how you describe Albania and Tirana and other places, because if someone does not go through your description, may fall in the stereotype thought that she's just bullshitting us because she's here, foreigner, she has a job, she has decent income, she's respected everywhere because anyhow she speaks English, so let me say it all, she's beautiful. And then when you go through, you have a very structured way to explain your love. So it's not irrational, it's not just falling exotically for a country where, you know, you find some amusement with some chaos, with some colors here and there, with some people that are crazy, with some parties. No, it's very structured. And when you compare what you find in Tirana, the energy, and it's very beautiful the way you describe the experience in Tirana, and then you put in front of it big cities like Prague, like Milan, like this, like that, and you raise the issue of uniformization, of globalization of the thinking, and also globalization of the taste. And suddenly you feel cold, and you make the reader feel cold about it. So this is very, very, very interesting. But, and I'm not gonna bother you with the troubled Britain, because maybe you felt the trouble long ago, you left, and now when you say I never even loved it, I cannot revenge on that. But what's wrong with Britain?
Terrible food, awful, bad weather.
But what's wrong today? What's happening?
What's wrong today? The government is wrong. So their rhetoric against Albanians, I mean, number one, it's an embarrassment. I'm embarrassed when I see the latest thing that they've said. I'm embarrassed by their immigration policies. I'm embarrassed with the way they treat foreigners there. This is the main thing. Like, it makes me feel, when I hear people telling me, Albanian people telling me their children are being bullied in school in England for being Albanian, or their mother was refused a visa to come and visit because their daughter's just had a baby, you know, I'm embarrassed to hear that. Like, what makes the government there think the country's so great that they have the right to turn away another human being who has, you know, a valid reason to want to go there? I have friends that have failed to get visas to study at university there, for example. I mean, this is ridiculous when the country has a shortage of workers as well. And I find it really embarrassing. It doesn't make me proud to be British at all.
And I have to thank you for having been vocal in that, because we need voices to fight with for what is right and what is fundamentally wrong against, and being anyhow, you can't deny you are a Brit. It makes us feel more in a good company, let's say, although you may again criticize me because you want to maybe to say that no, you are just one of us, Albanian, and you fight for your beloved country of adoption, Albania. My last point, Alice, we had a big clash, not me and you personally, but let's say me and the journalists and the media people. And I come back to what you revealed unintendedly in the beginning. I asked you a meeting, and I asked you help to understand. First of all, to introduce myself and to make sure that you have another example that devil is not as black as it looks. And I must say, I had the example. You were not as terrible as I always thought. But without entering in the depth, you are a big advocate of self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me the truth now. Do you think that it's enough in a world that is so much out of control when it comes to unleashing whatever comes in whomever mind, make it a public domain, attack people, bully people, say terrible things about people, make people panic with what different kind of fake news and so on. And it seems that this is what the humans feel more comfortable with. The possibility to just get out everything that they kept in their belly for a long time. And to hide behind anonymity, to use fake profiles, or to just call for the amendment of full freedom and say whatever they want. And on the other hand, what about the victims of it? Because there is no balance in it. That on one hand you are attacked, and on the other hand you cannot react. Or you'll react in the same way, or you'll follow another path. But where it goes. So, do you really believe that the world, especially because of social media, because of this totally out of control information, is going in the right direction, and just some self-regulation will fix it?
So, firstly as well, I completely understand your point about people attacking and fake news, because as I'm sure you know, I was attacked very badly in the media here in 2019. I nearly lost my daughter because of the stress. I was hospitalized. I was pregnant at the time. So I've been on the receiving end to the point it put my life in danger, and hers. So I know very well. But I think, and you mentioned human nature, and I think there is no way that we can control the media and social media. We cannot. It's because it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. We now have this whole AI thing that's sort of coming up. We're never going to be able to rein it in completely unless you go full authoritarian on it in the way that Russia perhaps does, or China, which is not something that you can do or should be done, and it doesn't work anyway. We cannot control it. So if you cannot control it from the outside, how can you try and improve the situation from inside? You can do self-regulation. You can educate the readers, the people, on how to understand what is fake news, what is disinformation, what is attacks, how to push them more towards reliable reporting. But this is a losing battle that we face as consumers of news, that we face as journalists, and you as a government will face as well. I don't think you can ever rein it in. But what can be done is pushing things like self-regulation. I think state interference is problematic in any country. And I think that there are already legal sort of procedures in place to deal with defamation and things like that. But I think in any country, the state intervening too much is problematic. Because whatever law you put into place, that law will always have some way that it can be used to censor, to intimidate. It can be used in a negative way, even if that's not the intention, the initial intention behind it. And that's what I think. So maybe it's a slightly negative perspective that we're never going to be able to control it, because it's going to keep developing. People will always find new ways to continue doing this.
But there is a okay. This is an explanation that I understand, but I think it's very fatalistic, because this derive of untruth and of irresponsible behavior in the public space will bring the world, and especially the democratic world, to collapse. This is my instinct, and I couldn't. I haven't had the chance to tell you that my first contact with the free media has been with The Guardian in the 90s, when I was pushed by a friend of mine to write, because he invited me to go to London. I was refused British visa, and I wrote something for The Guardian. And at that time there was no mobile phones. I go back at my place. I was in Paris, waiting to go to London, and I find this answer machine message: Mr. Rama, we need to talk because we have to discuss about the title and a few little changes in your article. It was very late, I couldn't call, and I thought the day after it was published, and I bought The Guardian. It was not published. And then I called, and I was anxious because it was my first time. I couldn't even believe that I would publish in an international newspaper, and I thought maybe it was something terribly wrong. And the lady said, "No, we couldn't publish without checking with you." And there were very minor changes. A few months ago, the experience with The Guardian was completely different. They sent an article full of inaccuracies, to say it mildly. They wanted a quote from me as Prime Minister, and we responded that we were ready to have a conversation. And in the meantime, we sent them facts about, and their answer was, "This is very interesting, but we have a deadline for tomorrow at 12." And it was published like that. So it should have been a reason why the fact-checking and the respect for the author has been so much a religion in the world of media. And
this goes back to what you said. There is this frenzy, this media frenzy. Everyone wants to be the first to publish. They're trying to push out news as quickly as possible. It's more monetized than it was back then when you wrote. This is the issue. And again, I mean, this is an issue in Albania as well. Media struggle to survive here, financially, unless they are sort of involved in advertising and getting money for here, or they have other business interests, so it becomes difficult for people to not be motivated by money to do their work as a media or a journalist here.
Thank you.
No pressure.
Ti e bëre këtë hap, erdhe këtu, takove djallin. Dhe unë jam shumë mirënjohës dhe falenderus. Por një pyetje kam. E mendove përpara se sa të përgjigje pozitivisht, dhe a e mendon tani dhe më shumë që mund të thonë të bleu, të korruptoj, të bëri për vete, të bëri magji, nuk je më jona, nuk je më... Understood?
But have I sat here and agreed with everything you've said?
No, you didn't. But the fact that you came here...
but this is and do you know what? And I was talking to one of your team members outside earlier. I said, this society is so divided, and the concept that you can't engage with either side, simultaneously is completely alien. I'm accused of being paid by this one and that one, and actually, as someone who sits on the fence, as much as I try to, and I write with passion and honesty, I reserve the right to come and speak to you or to speak to whoever. I'm interested. I was curious by your invitation. I liked the fact that you wanted to tackle some of the critical things I've written. I think it would be silly to say no. I don't see it as me sitting here going, "Oh yes, you're completely right. Everything you've done is wonderful." That's not what I'm doing.
No.
But people will criticize everything anyway. When I interviewed you in December, everyone said, "Oh, she's been bought by the Socialist Party." When I interviewed Berisha a week later, "Oh, she's been bought by Berisha." You can't win either way. The concept that I might be in between the two or have my own independent mind or am not motivated by money or politics is alien to a lot of people, but that's their problem, not mine.
Kjo ishte Alice Taylor, një britanike që ka adoptuar Shqipërinë si abdeun e vet të dashur. Dhe ky ishte takimi ynë, i cili shpresoj të ketë provuar se djalli nuk është aq i zi sa duket.